everyone. It's 4 o'clock in New York on a huge day of news. Quote, conspiracy and a cover-up. Prosecutors today reminding the jury of the basic facts of this historic first ever criminal trial of an American ex-president. As we come on the air, closing arguments are right now underway in the people of the state of New York versus Donald J. Trump. We're getting live updates from inside the courtroom. We're going to do our best to watch them together and interrupt our conversations and bring you any and all significant moments as they're happening. Over the last few hours, prosecutor Joshua Steinglass has been going through the claims that were made by Trump's lawyers in their closing argument this morning. Steinglass, the prosecutor, pushed back against Trump's lawyers. Daniels was extorting Donald Trump. Prosecutors saying this, quote, extortion is not a defense to falsifying business records. And if you have any questions about that, you can ask the judge. After putting on the stand just two witnesses, one of whose credibility completely crumbled during cross-examination, Donald Trump's defense team today closed by arguing essentially that there was never any criminal conspiracy to conceal the hush money payments. Trump's attorney, Todd Blanche, also went after Michael Cohen aggressively and loudly, calling him the, quote, MVP of liars and the gloat, get it? Claiming he lied to the jury without, as the New York Times points out, quote, presenting a smoking gun that clearly shows that to be the case. And just in the last hour, prosecutor Joshua Steinglass got to work in addressing and doing any cleanup he thought necessary on these questions around Cohen's credibility. Steinglass telling the jury this, quote, we didn't choose Michael Cohen. We didn't pick him up at the witness store. Mr. Trump chose Mr. Cohen for the same qualities his attorneys now urge you to reject. Whew. Noticeably missing from the defense's arguments this morning, any and all pushback against that wealth of documentary and circumstantial evidence, all of it corroborating Cohen's testimony before he ever took the stand. Blanche on that front claimed that there wasn't a shred of evidence regarding the Trump Tower meeting where the repayment scheme was hatched. That is not true. Blanche ignored in his close the handwritten notes entered into evidence from Alan Weisselberg that showed exactly how the $420,000 reimbursement payment was added up. Blanche, Trump's lawyer, also made a bold claim. He said today in front of the jury that plan for the National Enquirer to catch and kill negative stories about Donald Trump ahead of an American presidential election was totally normal. Basically, everybody does it, that it was above board. Blanche arguing, quote, every campaign is a conspiracy to promote a candidate. To that, prosecutor Joshua Steinglass called the agreement at Trump Tower where the plan was hatched a, quote, subversion of democracy, arguing that the whole point of the scheme was to, quote, pull the wool over voters' eyes. Blanche did not finish his closing this morning without doing something that earned perhaps the sharpest rebuke of this 5-week trial from the normally very even-keeled Judge Juan Merchan. Blanche, in his close, said this to the jury, quote, you cannot send someone to prison, based on the words of Michael Cohen. Prosecutors objected immediately, and Judge Merchan said this, quote, I think that statement was outrageous, Mr. Blanche. It's simply not allowed, period. It is hard for me to imagine how that was accidental in any way. So then the jury went out after that happened. And later, when they came back in, the judge corrected Blanche in front of the jury, telling the jury explicitly that a prison sentence is not required in this case. And on Blanche's comment, the judge added this, quote, that comment is improper and you must disregard it. The prosecution's still underway and getting its final chance to hammer home the case against Donald Trump. It's happening at this moment, and it's where we start today with some of our most favorite reporters and friends. They've all made their way from inside the courtroom, which was very warm today, up to our very climate-controlled studio. For that, we're grateful. With us at the table for the hour, MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissman is back. New York Times investigative reporter Suzanne Craig is back, and former executive editor reporter with American Media Inc. and special correspondent for The Hollywood Reporter, Lachlan Cartwright, is back as well. Outside the courthouse for us, NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard. Vaughn, let's start with what's happening right now, and then why don't you and I work our way back to this Mershon rebuke.
Right, Nicole, the jury just re-entered the courtroom. Now, on a typical day at 4:30 p.m. Eastern is when court is ended. Everybody has been sent home. But earlier in the day, Judge Mershon made it clear that they would try to get through both sides' closing arguments by the end of today, essentially so the jurors could hear it in one major chunk. But now you're looking at a reality that just a few minutes ago, there was a break that was announced. The jury left the room, and the prosecution, about an hour and 45 minutes into their closing arguments, were just asked by Judge Mershon how much more time do they have. They said they were just about 1/3 of the way done. So if you do the math, that could take us to about 8 p.m. Eastern if the time moves based off of their clock. Now, the defense, they went for about 3 hours this morning as part of their closing arguments. And when you compare the two sides, you can look at the defense. It was a rather simplistic, effort and contention that was made to this jury. It was twofold. Number one, Michael Cohen is a liar. More than 45 times I counted that Todd Blanche either called Michael Cohen a liar or said that he had lied. And then they are also trying to cast doubt, a reasonable doubt in the minds of these jurors that Donald Trump was intimately aware of the scheme and what he was paying Michael Cohen for. On the other side of this, the prosecution, it's much more methodical. And that's why you could be looking at their closing arguments lasting anywhere, by their own math, 5 to 6 hours, because it is on them to make the case to this jury that Donald Trump was not only intimately aware, but behind the conspiracy that went from August of 2015 all the way through 2018.
Andrew Weissman, to Vaughn's great reporting. They're going to take a break in about an hour at 5 o'clock. Judge Mershon's going to ask the jurors how they're doing, if they want to keep going or if they want to take a break.
Right. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the prosecution would like them to come back tomorrow just so they're fresh. It is. It is a long day to sit there and take in all that information, and you want them to be fresh from both sides, so they're hearing it. So, I'm sure Josh Steinglass is ready. I mean, in other words, he's got everything buttoned down. It's really very smooth. But in terms of what I think the state would want, I would think they'd want to take a break. But it's pretty clear from when we were there that Judge Mershon is going to leave it totally to the jurors and say, he left it. He's so even-keeled, as you pointed out. He just said, it's whatever you want. If you want to stay, we'll do that. And then but he also said, you want to come back tomorrow, we'll do that too.
Right.
Like with not trying to put a thumb on the scale. It's like, whatever you want, that's what we're going to do.
And I mean, who would you argue it benefits if you come back in the morning?
I think it benefits the state it's not that they need the time to prepare. It's just, again, you just
get a fresher jury. Exactly. Get a clean page in the notepad.
You know what it's like if you go to a museum, at some point you're like, I can't see it anymore.
That's me after 10 minutes, but yes.
Okay, some 10 minutes, some an hour, but that's a lot of time to be processing and having all of that incoming.
So then, Craig, what's in your notebook? I want to work our way backwards because I want to bring our audience into what's happening right now. And what's happening right now is what the hallmark of the state's case has been precision, but also a nimbleness, an ability to adapt to what the defense is putting before the jury and the judge. And they seem to have adapted to what Blanche did this morning.
Right. I think they've pivoted. I mean, and Josh Steinglass got up. It was interesting. We were talking about it. We take the subway from court up here every day, so we get a good chat session. And we were talking about Josh Steinglass's closing and how he started. It felt quite abrupt. It was interesting because he right away made a decision to address some of the things that Donald Trump's lawyers had brought up some of the things about Michael Cohen's credibility. There was a great moment about the call. I thought that was one of the best moments that we saw, where there's that call that's in question where Michael Cohen calls Keith Schiller. And is it about the harassing phone calls that Michael Cohen had been getting from a 14-year-old, or was it something to do with Stormy Daniels? And Josh Steinglass actually in that, he made up he kind of role played the call and fitted it, I think, into 92 seconds. So he, at the beginning, it did feel a bit abrupt, but he decided to address some of these things right away. But I think that the main thing that came out of this morning, when you distill it all, there was some issues, where Donald Trump's lawyers looked first at that the payments were legal. That was one of their first things. But the main thing that they did was go after Michael Cohen over and over and over. They called him, the gloat, greatest liar of all time. And they just kept hammering home that he is a liar and that you can't believe anything he said. I think that was sort of the underpinning. Some of their stuff, I thought, though, it was weak. There was they started out, and in a vacuum, it felt like a smart idea to argue that these were payments for legal services, but then they put on the screen the now famous exhibit. Is it Exhibit 35? Yeah,
36.
Where we've got the gross up, where Alan Weiselberg grosses it up, and then they go in, and Donald Trump apparently signed off on it. Michael Cohen takes it to him, and they're saying that's for legal services. For the Stormy Daniels payment, right. Come on, and I wouldn't have put it up in the first instance, but I wouldn't have let it linger there. If the jury had forgotten it was on the paper that was the wire transfer, they remembered it this morning. It was just another reminder, and it really did defy common sense. I mean, when you're looking at it, it's not for legal services; it's on that paper.
I thought it was remarkable that Todd Blanche did the Access Hollywood role play himself. Catch and kill, everybody does it.
And everybody doesn't do it, and I can tell you that from a vantage point, a unique vantage point,
Can I?
of having worked in newsrooms prior to my tenure at AMI, and then post my tenure at AMI, that this type of behavior does not go on. And what actually went on here was a tabloid news organization got twisted and turned into becoming a criminal enterprise. And that was where I left off in terms of this afternoon, as we were hearing of the three payments. And if I just sort of go into the first one just for a moment, and just sort of how highly unusual the Dino the Doorman situation is. Firstly, you have a $30,000 amount of money, which was highly unusual for American media to pay. Usually we would pay thousands of dollars for stories, but a story that we weren't running, particularly to make a payment, was again unheard of, as well as that sum of money. And then the other element of that, which made it extraordinary, was to then present Dino the Doorman with $1 million break clause in his contract and lock him in to in perpetuity. And it was kind of cheeky earlier of the defense to sort of get up and say, well, David Pecker said he was going to run this story and sell millions of copies of the Inquirer. He didn't actually say that. What he said is that he had an intention to run it post the election. So I thought the defense was doing prosecution was doing a great job of just really countering some of the misinformation that the defense was doing. Because you remember, this jury, David Pecker was a month ago, and even myself, I'm sitting in that courtroom having to sort of recollect, what David Pecker had said a month ago. So I thought they were starting to do a really good job, and just as I was leaving, they were moving on to Karen McDougal and that catch and kill.
Well, I think they're back. I mean, one of the remarkable things, Von Hilliard, that I heard the defense do this morning was to say Access Hollywood was personally challenging for Donald Trump. And one of the exhibits was from C-SPAN, and it was Trump at a podium saying, "This is going to kill me with the women. The women, my women are going to be." One of the pieces of evidence, again, I said this 5 weeks ago, the jury's going to be asked to not believe what they can see with their own eyes, hear with their own ears, and read in front of them. Take me inside how this is playing out right now in the prosecution's, I don't know if this is a rebuttal to that argument, but their pushback to the arguments made this morning.
Right, literally as we're speaking right now, they're going through the Access Hollywood tape and that timeline in which the defense, I was in the courthouse during that part, and I was just actually, right before coming onto your show, was in the courthouse listening to Josh Steinglass's presentation. And I think if you're comparing also these two individuals and how they explain this moment in time to the jury, they're diametrically opposed to one another. You have, on one hand, the defense for Donald Trump, Todd Blanche, suggesting that it, quote, makes no sense that anybody would think that somehow a National Enquirer story would change the outcome or influence the 2016 election, which on its head doesn't make sense then why David Pecker was meeting with Michael Cohen and Donald Trump at their request inside of Trump Tower, and why he made the commitment to be their eyes and ears. And inside of that Trump Tower meeting, David Pecker was the one who testified that he would inform Michael Cohen of any salacious stories involving women and notify him so that he could have them killed. And then you go to Josh Steinglass here as we speak, currently playing this out for the jury as well. And this is where they're using not only the exhibits, but also making the case that Donald Trump's motive in this case was Stormy Daniels, because again, they're talking about the conspiracy here and what was the motive to falsify the documents. And the motive was Stormy Daniels, and that is where the prosecution was questioned as to why they got into the salacious details. But Josh Steinglass has already made the case to the jury here that those details were important because it showed why Donald Trump took the actions that he did and why he used Michael Cohen, who, we should note, in the last hour, the prosecution has made the case, served as a liaison and was a known liaison, not only to Dylan Howard and David Pecker, but a liaison to the Trump campaign, a liaison to the Trump organization, all but working as a deputy. And in a moment of crisis there around the hours after the Access Hollywood tape, who did Donald Trump turn to, as well as in those weeks after the Access Hollywood tape drop? He turned to his deputy, Michael Cohen.
Let me read. I want to be clear to our viewers. This is not an official transcript. These are notes from our reporters, our colleagues inside the courtroom. So they're as close as can be, accounting for perhaps some grammatical stuff. So prosecutor doing just what Bond is describing. Quote, 4 weeks before the election, the campaign was rocked to its core by the release of the Access Hollywood tape, a video of a presidential candidate discussing how to grab a woman by the genitals. It was another example of them trying to make the case about Michael Cohen, but it isn't that. Hope Hicks told you that the news was so big it eclipsed the coverage of a Category 4 hurricane bearing down on the East Coast. Steinglass, so I guess it was like a Category 5 hurricane. Endorsements were reconsidering, and the Republican National Committee considered replacing Donald Trump. Preparations for the debate were halted as they entered into damage mode. It all began with this email from Washington Post reporter David Farenthold with a transcript of the Access Hollywood tape. The email asked for the campaign's comment, and Hope Hicks testified that her initial instinct was to deny the legitimacy of the tape. When she realized it was real, the strategy quickly shifted from deny, deny, deny to spin. Lachlan, to relive all this seems like something that the defense in some ways invited. I mean, I'm guessing the prosecution would have done this anyway, laid out the motive for the cover-up, because the business records are where the sort of original sin, the original criminality comes in, and the motive and the campaign fraud is the underlying crime. But to relive all this is the most damaging stuff. in Donald Trump's eyes. This is what Donald Trump didn't want the voters to know.
And I think it was been quite effective just to go back to that meeting at Trump Tower in August of 2015 as that scene setter, just to reinforce how important it is when Michael Cohen meets with David Pecker and Donald Trump, and they come up with this scheme to catch and kill negative stories. And I think that was very important to bring it back to that, because this morning we just heard, oh, Michael Cohen's a liar, and it was very Mirandering. But to bring it back to that meeting at Trump Tower, I think was essential to just kind of get the jury's heads back to where this conspiracy starts. And then that is the reason that we're here with the Stormy Daniels payment.
I just want to say that Hope Hicks, in discussing the Access Hollywood tape, did such an incredible job of showing how crucial it was that they then make the Stormy Daniels payment. She set the tape. That was a Category 4 hurricane. And then to hear Donald Trump's lawyers this morning in court say, it was just sort of another thing going on. Like there was other things going on. I actually wrote down, instead of, I said the idea that the Access Hollywood tape was not a big deal is comical. I wrote a note to myself. Like it was such a huge deal, and they just tried to dismiss it.
Yeah.
So Josh Stanglis had a great line to your
good.
point
Okay.
about saying, because two things. One, Hope Hicks barely came up in the defense summation. So one of the things that you listen for as the prosecutor is not just what is said, but what's left out. It was remarkable. And so Sue's point about exhibits 35 and 36, barely addressed. I mean, in the most superficial way. So that's a huge hole. Hope Hicks, every damaging statement, not addressed. I mean, I was just like, you have to say something. Nope.
Nothing.
On Hope Hicks on this Category 4, Josh Stanglis had a great line saying, let's just go back to, you think it was no big deal? Hope Hicks, which he said directly to the jury, no motive to lie. If anything, a motive to curry favor with the defendant, said, well, if it eclipsed the news of a Category 4 hurricane. So he said, so that makes us a Category 5 at the very least.
Just to remind people, she's running public relations.
Right.
She's in charge of the image, and it was a disaster.
Right.
There's no.
I mean, and it always boggled my mind that the defense decided to basically hand her tissues and then destroy Stormy Daniels, who didn't have eyes on any of the criminal acts of the fraudulent business records. What was behind that?
So, yeah, of course. Then that came up in the course of the sort of beginning part of Steinglass's summation, was sort of saying this was, you saw something very bizarre where they basically tried to destroy her for, Stormy Daniels, but nothing was said about, and this was Josh Steinglass saying, but David Pecker says all of these incredibly damaging things. Says all of these incredibly damaging things. Nothing. Hope Hicks says all these damaging things. Nothing. Saying, this is like the two witnesses they decided they have to go after are Stormy Daniels.
And Michael.
The other side of that he mentioned that I thought that was very powerful was he said that the people closest to Donald Trump had the most damaging information.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really great note that he struck, because Hope Hicks was damaging, her testimony was, and so was David Pecker's. And two people who are still, think highly of him.
And who they
David
haven't
Pecker got
attacked.
off the stand and said, he's still my friend, and he's
My
still my
mentor.
my mentor, which again makes it so effective that they're going back to where we started with this, to David Pecker.
I want to do two things. I want to pull back the curtain a little bit. So we have some notes coming in to us about what's happening as this is happening right now. What we understand to be taking place is probably about 40 more minutes of the prosecution making its closing argument. At 5 o'clock, the judge has told the jury he's going to hit pause and check in with them and see what they want to do. Do they want to keep going? Do you want to, liken it to studying, sort of power through, or do you want to take a break and come back in the morning? So we don't know yet. That decision will be made about 40 minutes from right now. We are also going to sneak in a break, do some more reading in, do some more checking on what's what's happening inside, but there's still so much more to come from inside the courtroom as the state's closing arguments continue. They're ongoing. We'll bring you everything that is happening live. The jury could be just hours away from beginning to deliberate their final decision in that first ever criminal trial of an American ex-president. And later in the broadcast,
বন্ধু কালাচান কি মায়া লাগাইছো বন্ধু কালাচান কি মায়া লাগাইছো পিরিতি শিখাইয়া মোরে পাগল বানাইছো পিরিতি শিখাইয়া মোরে পাগল বানাইছো বন্ধু কালাচান কি মায়া লাগাইছো বন্ধু কালাচান কি মায়া লাগাইছো পিরিতি শিখাইয়া মোরে পাগল বানাইছো পিরিতি শিখাইয়া মোরে পাগল বানাইছো যে বান্দাছো তুমি আর নয়নের পানে তোমায় সারা পাগল পারা মন থাকে না মনে বান্দা যে বান্দাছো তুমি আর নয়নের পানে তোমায় সারা পাগল পারা মন থাকে না মনে যৌবনের অসুখে এই বুকে লুকাইছো যৌবনের অসুখে এই বুকে লুকাইছো পিরিতি শিখাইয়া মোরে পাগল বানাইছো পিরিতি শিখাইয়া মোরে পাগল বানাইছো বন্ধু কালাচান কি মায়া লাগাইছো বন্ধু কালাচান কি মায়া লাগাইছো পিরিতি শিখাইয়া মোরে পাগল বানাইছো পিরিতি শিখাইয়া মোরে পাগল বানাইছো লাগাইছো আমারে দেহে আগুন তোমার ছোঁয়ায় আসে আমার রঙেতে ফাগুন যৌবনে লাগাইছো আমারে দেহে আগুন তোমার ছোঁয়ায় আসে আমার রঙেতে ফাগুন ভালোবাসার টানে তুমি মনটা ভুলাইছো ভালোবাসার টানে তুমি মনটা ভুলাইছো পিরিতি শিখাইয়া মোরে পাগল বানাইছো পিরিতি শিখাইয়া মোরে পাগল বানাইছো বন্ধু কালাচান কি মায়া লাগাইছো বন্ধু কালাচান কি মায়া লাগাইছো পিরিতি শিখাইয়া মোরে পাগল বানাইছো পিরিতি শিখাইয়া মোরে পাগল বানাইছো